All right, guys, welcome in. We got a special guest today, the 16th ranked mid-market afternoon show host in America. It's Gabe Kuhn.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
It's my
Shout
brother.
out Barrett Sports Media for their list at number 16 came in the Gabe Kuhn Show.
Yeah, I was going to say.
ESPN, Memphis. I will say this though. I told my program director today. I said I'm going to go Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm remembering all 15 ahead of me.
Yeah.
We can't take this disrespect much longer, man. I got to remember
Exactly.
all 15 ahead of me and outperform.
Yeah, well, this is the second year in a row you're in the top 20. Like, are you just like what's the feeling like?
I mean, it feels nice to be recognized, but it doesn't change my day to day.
It doesn't
feel the same.
It doesn't give you a big head, although
No,
in our family, big heads kind of run.
We know about this, brother. We know about this.
It just
fitted
is.
caps were never a thing for either of us growing up. Man.
Size 9. That's
unless you had a size 8, it was over with, brother. We had to have the personalized fitted caps if we were ever going to rock them. Yeah. And honestly, it was sad because fitted caps were in back when
they
we were coming up.
We used to have them. Like, I feel like we wore them and then we kind of outgrew them, and then now we've got the adjustable.
Once we outgrew them, they wore us more than we wore them.
Exactly. Yeah. So, first of all, some of you will remember we used to do a podcast together called TKT Podcast. And everybody is like, oh, well, what happened to it? I'm like, well, like, we both got jobs. So I want to give some background on this. I want to clarify this right now. When we started TKT Podcast, you had just finished football.
Just finished, yes.
Just finished football.
The idea, and let me just throw this in there. Yeah. The idea from you was like, all right, we're going to get you reps. You want to do this? Let's get you reps.
Yeah, that was it. Like, you hadn't had any internships in media. You hadn't had really any reps at all, either in production or on the air. So my idea is like, well, let's do it. And then we started that like 4 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago?
About 5 years ago. And now you are the afternoon host of the 16th ranked afternoon show in America. So there was no second vision for it. So, all right, well, mission accomplished. I was working in Iowa at the time, and now I'm working in Chicago. So that transition has been interesting. We're going to kind of fill everybody in on what's happened since then. I don't know if we're going to have enough time for that. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but basically I worked in Iowa, and then at the beginning of the pandemic, we were working remotely. I moved back to St. Louis, where I hadn't lived since high school, and then did the show part-time from St. Louis, and then moved to Chicago and worked at WBBM News Radio, and now I work at 670 The Score and WBBM News Radio, doing some production and anchoring, and obviously this podcast. And you were at Sports 56, and now you're at 92.9.
Well, I mean, I think we've skipped some steps. I had the AAF gig. Remember the Alliance of American Football? Shout out to the Ebersols, brother. Hell yeah, man. We kept that alive for 6 games. I got cut on my way back from holiday break. I was supposed to go to minicamp in San Antonio that year, and they cut me while I'm driving back. So I'm shitting my pants. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Wait, what the hell is going to happen? If you'll remember this, Alex, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hit up 92.9 and hit up Sports 56, see if they have anything. Neither of them had anything. I just sort of lucked out, met Johnny Radio. Shout out Johnny Radio.
Shout out Johnny
He's still
Radio.
doing his thing with the happy hour over at
Hey, he hasn't had me on in a while. I'm mad.
If you'll remember,
give me a call, Johnny.
I was asking you and Dad, man, should I for the time being, should I drive Uber? What should I do right now? I don't have a check coming in. I have no jobs lined up. I barely have any internships, so if I'm going to get in, somebody's going to have to take me at my word. Okay, I played 4 or 5 years at the University of Memphis and get in that way. Hopefully they help me. But it was a thing, man. It was wild. And I spent a week just sort of shadowing at Sports 56, seeing what they do. I did a little bit of board work. They didn't have any gigs, but they heard me on air one day when I did not have a job. I ended up getting a gig there, and the rest is history. Produced for a year and a half, hosted a show there for a year and a half, got to 92.9. It was as smooth as it could possibly be. And the timing of everything though, Al, is the craziest part.
Yeah.
Gary
Definitely.
Parrish, just legend, man. In the city of Memphis, decides to step away from the daily radio show at 92.9 at the perfect time where I'm a year and a half into my gig at Sports 56. So that sort of naturally came to me, and then I went through the interview process. But the timing of the whole thing has been so fast, expedited. And I remember having conversations like, am I ever going to be able to get to a spot like this? Am I ever going to be able to find a gig that sort of sticks? And it just worked out. And that's why to make a long story short with both of us, that's why TKT had to take a back seat. It had to take a back seat.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got everybody caught up. That was a wild time because I think back to you finish your college football career and you had a rookie minicamp with the Saints.
Yes, sir.
That I thought actually went pretty well, if I remember correctly. You came in, they didn't know a whole lot about you. They were deep at the offensive line position. You thought maybe you would get a call back for training camp, and it just didn't materialize. And then you got signed by the AAF, and you went to minicamp there for a few days and didn't really get to show a whole lot, and that was it, man. So 4 years of starting 51 starts during really one of the best periods in Memphis football history, coming off of just terrible years prior to you getting there, laying the foundation for that, and just that was it for playing. What was that transition like into the media?
It's tough because I listen, I have a lot of buddies, and I struggle with this at first. It's like the identity crisis you have when you've been so entrenched in that sport for 10 plus years, the better part of a decade, going on 15 years. It's just hard, man. You don't know who you are anymore. You have to relearn who you were before the sport and playing it at a high level. And so I had to go through that transition. And
back
understand.
To what, seventh grade or what?
I started in fifth grade. Man.
Yeah, I mean, fourth
I didn't start
grade.
Taking it serious till about seventh or eighth. So I think that's fair. But you have to relearn who you were before the sport. And luckily I figured it out quickly, found my calling, and it worked out for me. But having to relearn yourself as a human being is a lot harder than it sounds like me just saying it right now. A lot easier said than done. And I have a lot of teammates from from my time at the University of Memphis who struggled for years and years and years. I've always called for, and I think at the University of Memphis they're doing a lot better job than they ever have. And this is sort of a sidebar, but getting former college football players and student athletes ready for the workforce is so damn important. Man, It really is, because a lot of these guys aren't going to be able to play pro. And, having job fairs and stuff like that, Ryan Silverfield does a really good job of it. I've been over there a couple times to do job fairs, and, I've met some really good interns from the football team that have been over at 92.9 and shadowed us and learned some things. But having to go through that process without a lot of help while I was at the University of Memphis and trying to get internships and getting my foot in the door anywhere, it was just tough as hell. But I think it's important to rediscover yourself. As corny and cliche as that sounds, that was the process I had to go through. You have to find something else to pour that energy into, and for me, it was sports radio.
Yeah, I hear that from people when they're done with their NFL careers too. It's it's literally the same thing, and they think about it. They play even longer. They get an extra
an extra decade into it.
3 to 10, maybe 15 years. So it's an interesting discussion because, it kind of brings me to my next question. People that listen to your show, they're not gonna come away with it like, oh, this guy's a hot take artist.
No,
this guy's just here saying bullshit that he doesn't believe at all. There's nuance to it, and that's sort of my style. And I think that for myself, just looking at the state of the world, where we are with the media landscape, I wondered for a while, is nuance dead?
Yeah.
Is there a market for that anymore. Now, there have been some things that have, including this podcast right here, some of the reception to it and then the reception to your show. But like for a while, I'm just wondering, is this just not our time for people that have any nuance in their discussion?
You know, I have found that nuance and level-headed radio actually works. You know, it really does. Like, I don't think people just want to tune in to First Take all the time and hear Stephen A. Smith talk about if he can score a bucket in a game to 100 with LeBron James. I don't think that sells as much as it did 5 years ago. Obviously, the media landscape has completely turned to it. But I think you also see, like, you know, nuanced discussion in a day-to-day. Like I don't know if you've heard like Jason and Travis Kelce's podcast. I know that they're big celebrities, but like whenever they have a conversation about sports or the Super Bowl or whatever it is, like there's nuance. There's not a bunch of just shooting off take after take. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback of all time. Like they can say that in passing, but you can have a decent discussion about it. But I find it works. I really do.
Yeah.
And with what we've seen with the market, this is an interesting thing that I have noticed and that I do from time to time. And I saw your Colin Cowherd video. I know you do it as well. What has happened with the incessant hot takery around there in the sports media landscape is there's a new market that's opened up for people that opine about people that opine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
those hot takes that they're spouting off, people are able to make their way and you know, put together good content because they break down the arguments of said hot takes. So I think there's other markets and other things, other avenues that have opened up because of where we're at in the sports media landscape. It's just hard sometimes when you see the people in the utmost power, the people that get the most ratings. They can be hot take artists at times. But I think this is just how I feel. And you know, based on, you know, my friends and how they take in the show and the listeners and how they take in my show, I do think that there is a form of level-headed, nuanced radio and nuanced discussion that is making its way back into the landscape. I think people are getting more tired, you know, day after day of hearing, you know, Stephen A. Smith spout things off and just throw out hot takes. Skip Bayless is no longer in a job, and he's going through some hot water. I will not get to that. That's a different discussion for another day. But I think we're transitioning slowly but surely out of that. I think we're getting back to a normal, regular style of sports discussion.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's still going to be part of the landscape. People are always going to spout their opinions, but I think we're in a better spot than we were, say, 2-3 years ago. In this you know, current situation we're in.
I think that's fair. As far as like the Colin thing goes, I describe that as the media machine. But like to me, I think a part of that is healthy. Like having healthy discussion and I think Colin Cowherd is the class of our business.
Oh, dude, I respect the hell out of his work. 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
To find a different avenue to discuss every single topic. It's ridiculous. And like, you know what I do respect him more for than anything is I know people that have worked at Fox Sports with him. Yeah, and obviously he stayed out all the nonsense at FS1.
No, he was named in it, like at that in the lawsuit, and they were like, he's a true professional. True professional.
Professional. But what I have learned about him over the years is where Stephen A. Smith shows up to First Take every day, and producers bounce these topics off of him, you know, these debate topics off of him. Colin Cowherd, he has producers behind the scenes that he can bounce things off of, but he doesn't really need them. Right. He's a guy who really he's got his finger on the pulse of everything, and he just understands what's going to sell, how he needs to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to constantly get fed this information, these topics by producers. He can do that all on his own. And to have a 4-hour show and to have the volume and to do podcasts and to have all of this time taken up for yourself. And he's got kids. He's got a kid at, you know, his daughter. He's got so many different things pulling him in different directions. It would be easy to lean on those producers for topics and for content. He doesn't do that.
It's interesting. So from what I'm hearing from you, you think we're in a better place as far as like just regular sports discourse is concerned. The big question that I have is, can we get there to having nuanced conversations with tough topics? And for example, Like, I hate the way that people talk about the Rooney Rule.
The what?
The Rooney Rule.
Okay.
So, in the NFL, it's no secret that there's an issue with nepotism, and there is an issue with their hiring practices. When there has been an issue with their hiring practices when it comes to racial equity. Do you know how I know that? Because Roger Goodell has admitted it.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. Like, do you think that Roger Goodell would say that there was an issue if there was if there was no issue? You think he would admit fault for anything at that point? And like, not only admitting fault, but like literally trying to do something, because in my opinion, when we talk about the hiring practices of yesteryear as opposed to now, it had destroyed the talent pool. You just had these bums getting hired over and over. How many times has Josh McDaniels been hired? 3 times. 2 times he took the job, but he was hired 3 times.
Right.
After he went to Denver, and the first move that he made was to draft Tim Tebow. and you're now, and like, we're seeing now black coaches, and over the history, when they get a shot, they get 1 shot, 1 year, they're gone. They never get a shot again.
The hiring process, it's the firing process too.
And that is the nuanced part of this.
Right.
Because the Rooney Rule has now added incentive to, if you develop a candidate of color and they do good work for you and they move on to another job, you get compensatory draft picks, and not a 7th round pick.
49ers keep doing it.
A 3rd round pick. Yes, the 49ers keep doing it. And you're seeing the talent pool getting better. You're seeing these hires working out. Look in the NFC North at the general managers, and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and Brad Holmes, and Ryan Poles, and the coaching hires. Like, it fluctuates. It's not perfect. I think that the nuanced conversation is sometimes a team is going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to hire who they hire. I'm not saying that there should be any preferential treatment whatsoever, because the old way was preferential treatment. What they're trying to do, it's not perfect. The question should be, how do we perfect it? How do we get it so that coaches are not feeling like they're being brought in as token interviews? Well, how do we get rid of that?
Alex, here's the truth of it. It's what the NFC North has done. More people of color in GM positions. More people of color in ownership positions, being able to make decisions. That's the only way, because in the end of the day, there's Jerry Joneses and Robert Krafts and guys like that are always going to lean a certain direction, right?
Yeah.
A comfortable direction. And I know that that's like a very political way of putting it, but I don't want to put it any stronger.
I think it's fair
right now.
I think you don't have
like
to put it any stronger than that.
It's about their comfortability, and I don't see that changing unless you have more people of color in positions of actual power that can hire and fire guys. But the firing process, Alex, that's what frustrates me more than the hiring process. Like, I have gotten used to, as much as it annoys me, Leslie Frazier being an interview for every damn team in the world.
David Shaw,
one of the 2 Rooney Rule interviews out of the way, and David Shaw. Like, look at the Cowboys. They brought in Leslie Frazier and Robert Saleh. Had no intention of hiring either of them. They were always going to hire
the
Brian
Patriots,
but that's what they did. But the firing process is the worst thing ever. The firing process is disgusting. Rand Carthon, the GM for the Titans for 2 years, a year and a half. What did he do that was actually fireable, besides his ownership group thinking that they were better than they were coming off of the Vrabel era? He had to rebuild that roster, try to retool. I don't necessarily agree with every decision he made, but in the end of the day, name one thing he did that truly went wrong. And people will say Will Levis. Will Levis was a 2nd-round pick, guys. Like, they didn't have a high pick coming out of the Vrabel era. They didn't have a situation that was very desirable at the quarterback position. They didn't have capital to spend out there on the open market free agency-wise.
No, they're horrible.
Like, they were just in a bad spot. So he takes Will Levis, takes a flyer on it, doesn't work out. It's a 2nd-round pick. At least he didn't spend a top 10 pick on the damn guy. Then I would say it's fireable. It's a 2nd-round freaking – he's 33rd overall. Gerard Mayo and my guy Antonio
Kraft?
Pierce.
Antonio Pierce, yeah.
While I don't think that they were like the best guys for the jobs that they got hired into, compared to white counterparts, brother, they got no time to do anything of substance.
They got 1 year.
They have, Gerard Mayo has a brand new quarterback, no O-line. Defense is all elsewhere. His best defensive player had blood clots, for God's sakes. Like, what do you want him to do in that particular situation off of Bill Belichick and all that he did for that franchise? And then with Antonio Pierce, again, like, I'm not saying he was the perfect hire, but, like, AOC and Gardner Minshew were his starting quarterbacks.
Yeah.
What the hell do you expect? Amir Abdullah in 2024 was getting 15 carries per game in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
What do you want the man to do? He's going to win 4 games. That's what was going to happen always. And I just think there's a level of development that white coaches absolutely get when they actually get the gig compared to black coaches. And I could go back to Steve Wilkes with the Cardinals. There's so many examples.
Byron Leftwich.
You hire Antonio Pierce and Gerard Mayo are good examples because these are first-time head coaches. What do first-time head coaches have to do? They have to develop into who they're going to be. They have to learn what to do wrong before they get it right.
Yeah,
they didn't get any time for development.
Yeah,
and that's more than the hiring process, the firing process for the black candidates.
Yeah,
it's insane.
And then the lack of like that second chance. Whereas as I just said, the retreads with the white coaches is crazy. Like, for example, I'm reading an article in The Athletic in December about Byron Leftwich. I'm like, what the fuck ever happened to Byron Leftwich? Wins the Super Bowl. Brother. What's up?
Eric Bieniemy.
Eric Bieniemy too. Wins a Super Bowl as the offensive coordinator. Nearly gets a job in Jacksonville. Becomes the fall guy for Todd Bowles and Tom Brady getting old and wanting to retire. And never gets another chance again to coach at any level. Like whoa, what that seems weird. But all right, good. We've accomplished our goal of having a nuanced conversation.
Correct.
About the Rooney Rule. Okay, so I want to get into the Bears a little bit and one of the hires that they just made. You mentioned Eric Bieniemy, the running backs coach, and I think Ben Johnson has put together a phenomenal staff. Getting Antoine Randall, the wide receivers coach from Detroit, and the collection of former players, and Eric Bieniemy, I mentioned, Dennis Allen on the defensive side of the ball with Al Harris, who's going to be the defensive passing game coordinator, and some older, some younger guys, some former players, some guys who are like Declan Doyle, the former tight ends coach from Denver, who seems to be sort of a prodigy as the offensive coordinator for Ben Johnson and is going to be a table setter for him. But one of the hires that they made, you are familiar with.
Yep.
Because I mentioned in 2018 you were in rookie minicamp with the New Orleans Saints, and at the time the Saints offensive line coach was Dan Roushar, who has just been hired by Ben Johnson as the offensive line coach. What can you tell us about him?
What I can tell you, obviously, I didn't spend a whole bunch of time with them.
Yeah,
but
a few days.
I'm familiar with the idea behind some of their pass protections and their run concepts and what they want to do. All his run concepts really, really relatively simple. They're power. They run a lot of inside-outside zone. That's what they did with the Saints for years and years and years with Alvin Kamara. Besides the power concepts, they were big on outside. This is a big thing that the Bears needed last year. Aiming point on a lot of these outside zones, run through the outside shoulder. That's what I was always taught at Memphis by a NFL O-line coach, by the way, and Ryan Silverfield, who's now the head coach.
You mean unlike this here?
I also think from a pass protection standpoint, one thing that the Saints always had to do, and I'll get into the weeds, but I'll try to explain it in a very simple way.
Please.
One thing the Saints always did, because they had a 5'9" pocket passer who couldn't move, and Drew Brees.
Are you saying Drew Brees was not 6 feet like he was listed?
They always focused on depth of pocket and inside-out pass protection. So one thing that became apparent when I was studying the playbook, and by the way, rookie minicamp's insane in that realm. They give you a fat-ass playbook. You
still have the playbook.
You better know it day one. You better have it ready to roll. But they do these things. You're a dual reader. If you have a 5 or a 6-man protection, 5-man in or 6-man, max protect is different. You have your assignments with a running back and a tight end, like everybody's in. And you only have a few route concepts. All those are usually the same. But you have a 5 or 6-man protection, maybe some 7-man protections. They have these things called dual readers. It could be a guard or a tackle. And dual readers, the whole point of it is if you have blitzing linebackers, if you have inside threats, we're taking those inside threats first because we want to worry about the depth of the pocket because Drew Brees is 5'10", 5'9". We need him to have some space between the interior 3 and his body on a 3 or 5-step drop.
Yep.
So they were always very big on dual readers and knowing your assignments, as a tackle or a guard. So, in other words, it's an inside-out pass protection that consistently worries about the depth of the pocket and not the edges of the pocket. They're way less worried about people bending those edges because they assume that said quarterback has enough pocket awareness to step up in the pocket if he doesn't get the depth he needs from his tackle.
Yeah, this is something we've heard about all offseason, and even before Dan Roushar was hired. Caleb Williams is about 6'1".
Yeah.
He's not 5'9", but he's about I'll say 6 feet tall. Like
sure.
Maybe 5'11", who knows. But he's not a taller quarterback. And too often last year, there was confusion constantly on pass protection. The interior of the offensive line giving up pressures because they either didn't know who to block or their center, Coleman Shelton, doesn't have the best anchor, getting pushed back into Caleb Williams' lap. There was confusion from the back. A lot of times, a lot of weird pass protections where you'd get a back having to block a defensive end or a defensive tackle, right. And just total fucking chaos. Game in and game out. And like week 16 of the season, week 2 of the season, same thing. That has got to be the first thing that they try to do, right? Like, if we know anything about him, they're going to I think they're going to follow a plan very similarly to what we saw the Carolina Panthers do last offseason.
I was literally going to bring up them as a carbon copy. Now, I am not for spending $155 million on 2 guards from a contract valuation standpoint. But
no? Oh, come on. Are you...
What you need to find is guys with low centers of gravity who can anchor immediately against some of the biggest defensive tackles in the National Football League. What the Panthers did, spent too much money, but Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt are perfect at that particular trait. They're really good at that, at anchoring quickly and helping the depth of the pocket. And why do you need that? You have Bryce Young, who's 5'9" or 5'10", standing back there. So I think a plan like that is necessary. Now, one thing you do have added with a guy like Caleb Williams, if you control the depth of the pocket enough, there could be more escape lanes, and you can find some ways to get him out and let him use his off-platform ability a little bit more. But first and foremost, you have to worry about him being able to take a drop without guys running free every single time directly in his face. Like, you just have to find a way to make it less chaotic in the first 3 seconds of a drop back, and Caleb Williams will be a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, well, I actually kind of want to ask you about Braxton Jones, because at that left tackle position, I felt like he's a serviceable player. He does, I mean, against Jared Verse, he struggled.
He's got traits, Alex. He's got traits.
He's got traits. He's an average left tackle who most of the time gets the assignment done, gives up too many close calls, like allows guys to get way too close to the quarterback. But my question is, say they sign Trey Smith this offseason.
Sure. Big money, though.
Big money. So about, we'll say 5 years, $105 million.
Yeah.
Right around there, right? And then they draft Tyler Booker on the left side. Are you then okay with a left tackle who is serviceable, who may at times give up a little bit too much? Would you come more around to the idea of going another year with him?
Well, the reason I would feel better about it, I think he's going to get better coaching next year.
Yes.
It's just so much about that Bears offensive line and the clips that I saw every year. It's just like they were unclear about their aiming points, what they're supposed to do in pass protection when they're a dual reader. Braxton Jones, one thing that is just it's such a fixable thing. You have 35-inch arms, man. Punch. Don't grab and sit. That's not the player you are. Punch somebody in their damn chest. Don't let them take the fight to you. Take the fight to them. I think those are so easily fixable with a better level of coaching.
You think so?
I think Braxton Jones could come along with a better level of coaching. But yes, it could talk me into, to answer your question, you strengthen the interior of that offensive line with the schemes that I know are probably going to be run with Dan Roushar as the offensive line coach. I feel a lot better about Braxton Jones and then the tackles they have in general. And I think Darnell Wright's a hell of a player too.
So you think that one of the biggest things that Roushar is going to correct is the communication, correct?
Yeah, the communication, inside-out blocking schemes.
Let's get into something here. I want to pull up a clip. We're going to do just one little clip here, and this was the Bear.
Clips, Al. I love. Come on, film breakdown.
I know you. I know you do. All right, so this is
early. This is a tough look, obviously, because you have 3 D linemen, known rushers to one side, so you have to fix your eyes immediately.
Yes.
And I do think, if you studied this on film, obviously I wasn't in the film room, this is something Caleb Williams in year 2 needs to do a better job with. And I think Ben Johnson can help him with that. When they give you something like this, where is the blitz usually coming from?
the left side.
So you have to decide, okay,
it's 4 on 3.
Where are we sliding this protection?
If it's Caleb Williams, he thinks that the blitz is coming from the right side, so where the 4 defenders are.
He would probably think that a lot of the pressure is coming from the right side because of all these not known rushers that are lining up in rushing stances.
Correct. So you've got 3 on 3 to the left. You've got 4 on 3 to the right. So you know that if if these 4 guys come, you've got to get the ball out quick.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and roll this play.
If all 7 come, you're hot. Throw it.
So the left side, you've got 3 on 3. That assignment is taken care of. Now, how you sort out what's on the right side is up to you, but let's just show this, and this is not how you want to sort it out. Okay, first of all, let's go back. All right. Watch Matt Pryor, the right guard. You got to block somebody, bro. Decide. Do you want to block 13 or do you want to block 2?
I got some really good advice when I was in college with Ryan Silverfield coaching me. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're dual reading and you're deciding, okay, who should I block? The running back has more time to react.
Yeah.
So pick one. The running back can adjust off you even if it's the wrong assignment. Make a decision. But what I would say, I'm going to go back to my first O-line coach in college, Vance Weiss. He had a bunch of sayings. Vance Weissisms is what I like to call him, Weissisms.
What
I would say about Matt Pryor here is you're more fucked up than a sack full of coat hangers. I mean make a decision, brother. Decide what you're going to do. Now, based on his eyes, I think what he thought, I'm supposed to squeeze down, protect inside out. I take number 2, back takes number 13. There we go. But make that decision. And let the back decide. Now, the back is staring down number 2, so I think he's assuming Matt Pryor's supposed to take 13. So they're just all jumbled up. But again, if you decide to just commit to one, the back can eventually make you right.
Right. And this was the thing that I was talking about. This I think is a good illustration. Where if I'm deciding, an offensive line coach, how to block this up, it doesn't take an expert. It doesn't take somebody like an offensive line guru to understand. You want big on big, and you don't want your back to have to take on a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
So I think here, if you go double squeeze, if you go Pryor to number 2, if you go Darnell Wright to 13, that runs the risk of this number 10 off the edge, who's a defensive end type, your back having to block him if he comes, which is not necessarily a matchup that you want. Or you can have Darnell Wright take number 10, Pryor squeeze, and then I think that's better. You've got your back reading 1 to 2 with 13 and 20, right? So if what you don't want is Darnell Wright going out and blocking the defensive back.
Yes.
No, I want no. And then Matt Pryor, like, let's go back. Where blocking nobody and allowing instant pressure. And oh, by the way, Caleb gets it off to Keenan Allen. He drops it.
It's insane confusion that happened there, and that's a tough look. That's Mike McDonald, right?
Yes.
And what he does on the defensive side of the ball, bringing that over. Like, they just try to confuse you. Probably a third down, if I have to guess, based on the 2-point stances. So, like, they're dialing up the most exotic thing they have. You're not going to see that every down. But when you do see that, you're going to have a lot more communication. What that showed me right there is just a lack of communication and lack of understanding from all five up front, including the back. There's just no understanding of how they're going to pick up that look. And I think that goes back to the film room and study and the damn film room during the week. You have to have some idea of what the way you're going to play things, and there was just no understanding there. I mean, what the decision there to me would be Matt Pryor squeeze down on number 2, running back, take 13, and then you have Darnell Wright on number 10, the known rusher off the edge.
Correct.
And then you're hot. You're showing 7. You haven't slid the protection. You're hot. Caleb has to get rid of it.
He's got to get rid of the ball.
Then you would be able to rid yourself of the offensive line and the running back being the fault there, the pass protection being the issue. You can't pick up everything. Right. Sometimes you are in a situation where you don't have enough guys in there. You haven't slid the protection correctly. I think that example right there was one of those times. But you could have handled it substantially better than you did.
Yes, that's all I'm saying.
And it looked like a bunch of chickens running around with their heads cut off. They didn't know what they were doing. Matt Pryor is – and also I think with Caleb Williams, this is where you got to slow down. And decide, like, oh, I see what's going on up here. I may not know where to slide the protection, but at least let me give these guys a couple of seconds, a couple of ticks off the clock to realize what the hell they're going to do before he just kind of like, here, let's play this. Before we snap the ball, I want them to have some idea.
All right, so
they shift him, and here comes a snap.
He shifts into it. He just, like, points for a couple seconds. All right, we're snapping. No, that's not enough. That's not enough time.
Give them some time to react to what just happened.
Yeah.
I think if I wrap up that entire thing, and I know this is lame, but it's just a lack of coaching across the board last year with the Chicago Bears. I think there are always going to be plays where an offensive line is a human, and offensive lineman is a human, like Matt Pryor there, and makes a mistake and just gets confused, paralysis by analysis. Mm-hmm. But based on Darnell Wright going out to the cornerback and the running back immediately stepping up and taking the inside guy, it just looked like there was no understanding of what actually was supposed to happen. And ultimately that traces back to the film room and understanding and how you were scheming them up during the week.
Yeah, that was week 17.
Goes back to coaching.
Yeah. If that's week 1 of the season, not acceptable.
And Matt Pryor, I played with him, by the way. This jersey right here, I played with him at the old NFLPA Bowl.
And to
He's
Matt
been in the league. He's a vet.
To Matt Pryor's credit, he actually got a lot better as the season went along.
But Al, he's a vet. It's not like he hasn't seen something like that before.
Yeah,
I think that's just a lack of understanding of what they were supposed to do. The Chicago Bears offensive line was supposed to do.
Yeah, which brings me to my next point: bring Matt Pryor back as a swing guard. Yeah. Like, we're talking about big, beefy interior of the offensive line who can produce some movement and play on both sides, like play left guard, right guard. I think Matt Pryor is a nice piece to have around as a backup swing guard. So
yeah, and he has some good film he put together with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's been in a room that's been very well coached.
Yeah,
he's seen it before.
Yeah,
you know, I think he's got enough. He's got there's value and experience with, you know, having been in rooms like that, having been successful, and I think Matt Pryor would fit that.
So that was just – I just want to give a little bit of illustration because when we talk about the Bears' offensive line, everybody's like, oh, no, replace everybody, get rid of everybody and start over. And I understand it to a certain degree because personnel, they've got to get better. But, like, I kept saying, I'm like, guys, it is more than personnel. There is something very disjointed and wrong going on that is deeper than personnel.
This is where the value of an O-line coach – and God, I know the messenger here is just going to, like, completely make people maybe in one ear out the other. But the value of an offensive line coach is so ridiculous. I mean, Mike Munchak was with the Pittsburgh Steelers for years and years and years. They had David DeCastro and Pouncey and all those guys, right? Munchak leaves. He's no longer there. Look at that offensive line now. They have deteriorated. They were a little better this year, but they deteriorated completely. The Patriots offensive line, Dante Scarnecchia, who is one of the best offensive line coaches. He was a guru for years and years and years. After the Belichick era, at least the last couple of years of the Belichick era, he's out the door. They have to replace him. That O-line completely
implodes.
Does nothing. And here's the best example, the most recent example. 2-3 years ago, Cleveland Browns were thought of as the best offensive line in football, right?
Yep.
Right? I mean, last year, going into the season, look at this damn offense. Wyatt Teller and Jedrick Wills and all these guys. Now, I will say they've had some injury issues. They've had some injury issues. They've had some problems. Don't get it twisted. But 2 and 3 years ago, their offensive line coach was Bill Callahan, one of the best doing it in the NFL, did it at college. I mean, he's one of the best you've ever seen coach offensive linemen.
Yeah.
He leaves this year. They are one of the worst offensive lines when it comes to pressure percentage. Their run game wasn't near the same. Some of that could be Nick Chubb, but I remember Dante Foreman running for 125 yards behind that offensive line 2 and 3 years ago.
Who was
the offensive line coach in the understanding and the schemes and the way that they're being taught behind the scenes, the schemes and everything else, it's so much more important than you think when it comes to finding an offensive line coach that knows what they're talking about. There's too many examples throughout the years we have played NFL football of offensive line coaches taking other jobs and that offensive line falling down a couple of notches. Good coaching is the cure for a lot of things. And I don't think the Bears are without talent, guys.
Yeah.
I don't think they are. I think they've got the talent. They've just got to have somebody in there to bring it all together.
I want to find a way to make people understanding and learning offensive line play entertaining. But before I even go there, as a former offensive lineman, if you would want the fans, because it's the most misunderstood position on the field, and because it's misunderstood, is really one of the first things to get scapegoated. Like when things go wrong with the offense, people will immediately point to the offensive line because they don't quite understand it. So it's an easy way to just say, oh, it's the offensive line. What would you say are a couple of like very important things that a lot of people don't understand that can help people understand the position better and understand how it affects an offense a little bit better?
I think one of the biggest things, and I really only have one on this. This is very frustrating to me when I watch football and I see offensive lines get scapegoated. Just because there's pressure and there's a sack does not mean the offensive line is at fault. Please stop doing that every time you see a quarterback who gets sacked a fair amount in a game. Sometimes it is the offensive line's fault. Yeah. They'll miss a block, they'll whiff. But sometimes you'll find a defense, like look at the Chiefs, what they did to Josh Allen on that 4th and 5. Mm-hmm. What did they do the entire game? They lined up into the boundary and they brought it to the field. Lined up into the boundary, brought it to the field. So they were confusing your eyes. That final play, Spags lines up to the boundary, brings it from the boundary. So we're sliding the protection away, and they're sliding away from the actual pressure, so there's no guys accounting for the actual blitzers. But that ultimately comes down, well, why didn't the offensive line give him any time? Because they were slid away. That wasn't actually their responsibility. You have to have some nuance when you're discussing protections and sacks and how pressure's getting into certain people's faces. I will say with the Bears is different. There was misassignments and missed blocks and everything else. But
even then, Caleb Williams.
Game, just because there's pressure and there's sacks does not mean the offensive line is at fault. I can tell you that right now.
I was going to say, even with the Bears, there were plenty of sacks on Caleb Williams this year.
Yeah. Like 100%. Hold on to the ball too long.
At least a dozen.
Run into one every once in a while. Like that's how it works. But I think that's one of the biggest misnomers just for casual fans. If you break down the tape, there are some times where the offensive line picked up everybody they were supposed to pick up, but they were slid the wrong way, or there were more guys coming in the blitz than there were in protection.
Yeah.
And that's on the quarterback in that case.
Well, let's get into it then. What do you make of this Super Bowl? Because I think this is as elite of a trench battle as you can get.
I think it's damn good.
I think the Eagles probably have the edge on both sides. It's a slight edge. I'm talking about just in the trenches. Eagles offensive line, Chiefs defensive line. Chiefs offensive line, Eagles defensive line. Like, when I watch Jalen Carter, is there a better defensive tackle, a more unblockable 3-tech or defensive tackle in the league right now than Jalen Carter?
Okay, listen, this is where erasure always happens. Sexy Dexy over there in New York is the best D tackle in the league. Dexter Lawrence is
okay.
But when we talk about the combining athleticism with size, Jalen Carter's he's there. I also think there's a guy coming out of the NFL draft sidebar, Walter Nolan, who's very similar to the guy.
You like Walter?
Very excited to see him.
Okay, I got to pop the tape on.
Into the NFL. He's ridiculous. But yeah, I would say the Eagles have the edge. But, if we've learned anything about the Chiefs, that doesn't quite matter.
No.
Well, really, the dynasties of the 21st century doesn't matter what the roster looks like and who you think has the edge. Those teams were better at situational football. The Chiefs are just so damn good in those situations. They're unflapped because they've been there so many times. But I would say, yeah, the Eagles have the edge in both situations. Chris Jones is still going to be a load to handle on Kansas City Chiefs defensive line. But it is kind of crazy. When I was just doing this exercise the other day thinking about the Eagles offensive line. Lane Johnson, Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of runway with Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson as well. Like, we have 3 Hall of Fame caliber talents on that Eagles offensive line. I don't think that gets discussed enough and how damn good they are. Saquon Barkley's been phenomenal. That offensive line is crazy good. The ability they have up front is nuts. And by the way, good offensive line coach and Jeff Stoutland, who's just been there for years.
Yeah.
Sidebar. But yeah, I'd say the Eagles have the edge in both.
It's slight though. Like, don't get me wrong.
I think the Chiefs could prove us wrong. The Chiefs' offensive line could prove us wrong.
Yeah,
and the reason I say
fair.
that is because the interior of that offensive line is so damn good, right? You have Creed Humphrey and you have Trey Smith, and the big calling card for that Eagles defensive line is Jalen Carter in their interior too. Their edges not so good, so I don't know if they're going to be able to expose the Chiefs' offensive line in that realm, because Joe Thuney, weirdly enough, all-pro guard, probably he's on a Hall of Fame track. He's playing left tackle. He's actually filled in pretty damn good there. Jawan Taylor jumps off sides every play, but I don't know if the Eagles' edges have worked out. The Bryce Huff thing. The University of Memphis guy, I hope long-term it works out for him with the contract he got this offseason. Hadn't worked out with him. They don't have the edges to expose, the shortcomings of the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. It's strength on strength in that particular battle, and I think that's where the Chiefs could make up some ground. But I think Eagles versus Chiefs defensive line, like, I don't know what world where you don't pick the Eagles side on that one.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, like, with the interior versus interior. Kansas City offensive line, Eagles defensive line. It doesn't get much more of a heavyweight fight than that. And I've seen some film of Trey Smith going against Jalen Carter. And I've had, when I watch film of any offensive lineman in the NFL, like, hell, I was watching the film of the divisional round where they were playing the Packers, or was the wild card round, where the Packers offensive line, who all year, I mean, the Packers are consistently a top 5, top 10 offensive line in the league. I mean, they cannot. Nobody can block Jalen Carter. Yeah. He is too fucking stout and too quick.
Did you see?
He is just too good.
Did you see in the NFC Championship? It was like the 3rd, 4th play of the game. They run a wham. If you know anything about a wham, you have an H-back.
You send it backside.
Maybe it could be a guard who's coming in to just chop the legs out of that 3 technique, which is Jalen Carter. They run their freaking H-back directly at his legs to try to throw him off, because usually a block like that can make you rush a little different the rest of the game, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Jalen Carter hops over it and chases down. It's like, that's just not something that a 6'3", 320-pounder should be able to do.
Yeah.
It's going to be really fun to watch, but I
who you picking? I mean, everybody's going with the Chiefs, right?
I can't. I can't pick the Eagles, man. I can't do it.
No.
I can't bring myself to it.
Let me ask you this then. Is the NFL having the same problem that the NBA had a few years back when we knew it was going to be Steph versus LeBron in the final? And I just feel like there's no energy whatsoever.
Everyone feels that way. There's a fatigue of this matchup because we saw it in 57.
There's a fatigue of the Chiefs, to be clear.
Well, sure. Yeah, I guess so. But like dynasties are what we look back on 10, 20 years from now and look back on relatively fondly. Yeah. They're big parts of history. And I am one who likes to try to appreciate those things in the moment. Sometimes it gets hard, with how annoying the Chiefs fans have been and how annoying Bostonians used to be when New England was running the league. Mm-hmm. And they also cheated. So there was that. But I try to appreciate those things in the moment more than the casual fan. But this matchup in particular, after Super Bowl 57, I don't know about you, Alex. I wanted to see this rematch. I wanted this.
Yeah.
I was rooting for it.
Yeah.
And I never thought the Eagles would be back here after the way last year ended. But bowing out early in the wild card round to the Bucks, like it was ugly. And what is kind of funny is the view of Nick Sirianni versus who he actually is as a coach. Everyone hates the guy, man. And I get it.
It's the introductory press conference.
Feels like Jalen Hurts has to step up and be the grown-up in the room sometimes and keep him from running his mouth. But here's the truth. He's the first coach in 40 years, in his first 4 years of coaching, to go to 2 Super Bowls. He's 53-23 as a coach. He's third all time in that time span of being a head coach, and as far as win percentage is concerned. Everyone thinks he's the biggest doofus in the world, and sometimes he acts that way. But like the proof is in the pudding with the way that team competes for him.
Yeah, I mean it's a fine line.
It's kind of wild to see that and how that's played out in the public eye.
Like preseason, we're talking about he could be gone at the end of the season. And 100%. Saquon Barkley saved his ass. I'm just saying, man. Saquon saved his ass.
Saquon Barkley is about to get Kellen Moore a job.
Yep.
Daniel Jones owes him millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And he saves Nick Sirianni's ass.
And he's the reason that this team has any chance in this game.
Saquon Barkley has a nice little track record of saving people's asses and giving them, lining their pockets with money where he doesn't even get the damn money. Because running back's been so freaking devalued over the years that the most he can make is $13 million a year. And I hope that we've gotten out of that. I hope we have seen Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, him. I hope we've seen
Josh
the running
Jacobs,
back matter.
James Cook.
I hope we've seen it, man. I want to hear I'm gonna before you let me roll, I have to drop this stat on Saquon Barkley and just how idiotic this stat is. He has set the career number as far as 60-plus yard touchdown runs in a postseason. He set the career mark. He has 3 of them. He's done that in this postseason. That's this postseason.
Just this.
This
That's right.
postseason.
I mean, he's never been in the postseason.
Career mark for 60-plus yard touchdown runs in a postseason.
Oh, wait, no, they did have one. Did they have one postseason game when he was in New York? I don't know.
He didn't have a 60-plus yard touchdown.
No, I mean, of course not. With Daniel Jones as his quarterback, but yeah, I mean,
it's foolish. It's ridiculous.
It's so easy to see why it's happening too with that offensive line, and it's just a match made in heaven, and it's. Quite honestly, the only reason I think they have a shot in this game, like where I could make the argument, if Kansas City wants any chance of winning this game, they've got to slow them down. And if they do that, they have a real chance because the way their secondary has been playing and the way that Spags is disguising things right now is just diabolical.
Sure.
What he's doing. So if he makes,
I ask you this, I've chewed on this. What's slowing him down? What's the stat line that you feel comfortable about? What's the yards per carry look like? Because here's what I've learned about Saquon Barkley. I can have a 1-yard run, a 2-yard run, a 3-yard run, back to 1-yard run. But that next run could be 75 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah, that's it. He can't have.
You can't allow explosive plays.
Correct.
That's what's bottling him up is to me.
That's it.
Like people are going to try to look at just don't let him have 7 explosive runs, and then you'll be in a. But it's just how hard is that to do when he gets the ball 25 times a game?
Yeah,
it's impossible. It's shown to be impossible this year.
It definitely has.
No one's been able to do it. It's crazy, and that's why I think running back value needs to be back, because I feel like we had these conversations about Ashton Genty, who could be a first-round pick this year. Like, make the run game explosive again. That's how your team has success. Because then, if you look at the Eagles haven't turned the ball over in 5 games. How do you do that? How do you accomplish something like that? You run the ball as much as they do. You have a really good run game, so you don't put the ball into harm's way.
I love it. I love that this philosophy has – I'm not saying it's come from – but you learned this from your playing days.
Yeah.
And I learned this from watching you guys play. So this is the last topic we'll get into because I know you got to run. But when you went to Memphis, Justin Fuente was the head coach. Paxton Lynch was your quarterback. You're coming off some rough seasons. And your first year, you guys go 10-3. You flip the script. Paxton has a great year. The offense still developing. And then after that, you all of a sudden start getting running backs by the dozens into the program. And Vance Weiss did a great job. Then Ryan Silverfield takes over as the offensive line coach. And it just meshed so well where you have Darrell Henderson and Tony Pollard running wide zone all fucking day. Where
Patrick Taylor Jr.
Kenny Gainwell later, Antonio Gibson later. It just became this thing where you guys were so explosive, and the pass game was great. Anthony Miller and DeMonte Coxey, you guys had some talent but what made that offense so good was the explosive play after explosive play out of the running game. It made you unstoppable.
Yes, it is the best way to be a good football team. I don't know, be a good offensive team at the least. To be able to pop off that way in the run game, score from 60 yards out, and just demoralize a team that way, it's just impossible to deal with. And the reason I say that is because you're not putting the ball in harm's way. You are owning the ball better. People that talk about turnover margin all the time, this is why we're not succeeding. We had 3 turnovers. You know how you nip that in the bud?
Run
the ball at a high level and score with explosive plays in the run game and the screen game where you're not taking chances, throwing it into tight windows. It's just it's such a sustainable style of football. It really is. If you can do it at the highest of levels, you can sustain championship level football for a long time.
I am so sorry that we're coming to the end of the time here. Fatherhood, man. You're a father.
Yeah.
Myers, MJ.
Yeah.
How's
he's hanging in there, brother. He's got a big ass head. He's like
he does, man. I saw the picture. He's got a noggin on him.
He's got a noggin, 98th percentile in head. He's catching up, length and weight wise. I think we're up to 55th percentile in length. He was a smaller baby when he came out, but it's great, man. It really is cool. Like it's like I know that sounds corny, but like the reflection of you and realizing it's like, holy shit, like I made this thing. Like it really is it's something that blows your mind every day.
Yeah, it blows my mind that you like.
I know.
So I can't even imagine what it does to you. But
it is a survival. It's pure survival. We're 2 months into this thing. Let's not bury the lead here.
You got to have grip strength and anchor strength to handle it.
You have to have the mental fortitude of I don't even know, a Marine. You have to figure it out on the go. Well,
I appreciate you hopping on with me for an hour. I'm sure you got to get back to some diaper changing and whatever else you need to do. We'll chat again, and thanks again, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.